was more than just, I think, for the one day.
Hello, Kathy.
Kathy.
Hello.
No, I don't want to miss from Sue Ellen, but I know she said that she was going to Toronto.
Yeah, I think Sue Ellen's going to be there.
Week.
She said, yeah, she said she was coming, but I was really surprised from what she said last week, that I thought she was maybe getting
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Let's call the meeting to order and get going. The approval of the agenda, late items, anything, Paul?
Just the one item
Okay.
circulated by email earlier, just discussion regarding the August 22nd information meeting.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Should we put that in, should we put that in here somewhere?
Yeah. Maureen indicated to me she was calling in. Oh,
Yep.
She is. She's here.
She's here.
Maureen.
Hello? Oh, there she is.
Do you want to put it in as a 2.3? Make it official or not?
Yeah.
Since we've got Glen here. Approval of the agenda, no,
As
it's the
amended.
way. Thank you, David. Second, Rob, all in favor, thank you. Maureen, in favor?
Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll roll right into staff reports. 2.1, Glen, you're on.
Great, thank you very much,
Pleasure.
Commander and Council. There was a tender that was, two tenders actually that were closed. Council approved $600,000 total for 2019 culvert replacements. One was located on Miller Road and two located on Mount Gardner Road, specifically one on Guild Creek and one on Terminal Creek. Both of these, or all three of these culverts, experienced a flood in November of 2018. Upon further inspection by staff, all of them were determined to be in very poor shape and were scheduled for replacement. The tenders, we investigated Miller Road and we suspected that the budget allocation for Miller Road was going to be inadequate. $250,000 was allocated at the time for the Miller Road culverts. Due to the dewatering and also traffic control, given the fact that we need to maintain access through that corridor because it's the only in and out for the neighborhoods in that direction, we fully anticipated that the works would not be able to complete within budget. So we evaluated the condition of all three culverts and felt like if one needed to be deferred, Miller Road was the one to be deferred.
Sorry, Glenn. Maureen, can you mute yourself? Maureen?
Maureen?
Yeah, can you mute yourself? There's a lot of paper
Paper
shuffling
shuffling.
noise coming through.
Okay, we'll do.
Thank
Thank you.
Can you hear us all right? Can you hear Glenn?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Oh, hi, Sue.
Hi.
We heard you were a no-go, so we started without you.
Got back to the island after 8 last night.
Oh,
This is
okay.
my third meeting today. I'm here.
Wow, thank you, thank you. Okay, sorry, Glenn, carry
No
on.
problem. So with the anticipation of being significantly over budget, we made a decision to recommend deferring the Miller Road crossing until next year. We're still evaluating. We had problems being able to fully inspect that culvert to make final decisions on actions because some beavers had built a home in both the culverts that caused the water level to rise significantly. So those beaver dams were just removed last week, and we're going to be doing a further inspection to make a decision on whether any short-term actions need to be done this year on those ones to limp them through to subsequent years, or whether we can simply just defer all works until 2020. So we'll be coming back with new recommendations on how to proceed with the Miller Road crossing. But it was more urgent for Mount Gardner culverts because they were physically collapsing and the road structure is failing in itself. So materials were pre-purchased for the Guild Creek culvert and they're already sitting in the works yard. We've advanced purchase of the pipe for the Terminal Creek culvert because of scheduling issues. The tender is recently closed. There was 5 submissions on both culverts. We elected to tender them independently because we were unsure whether contractors would have sufficient crews to be able to do both culverts at the same time. It's important that they both get done in a timely manner. One of the requests in the tenders was for contractors to offer a credit should they be awarded both. The low bid came in at a total of slightly over budget for the 2 of them. I shouldn't even say slightly. With accounting for the credit, $10,000 for award to Triax Construction. The total is $442,287. The budget for those 2 was $350,000. So so it's about $90,000 over the budgeted amount for those 2 culverts themselves. However, because $600,000 was allocated for all 3 culverts, no additional funds are required at this time to complete the construction, but it certainly has implications for future works on Miller Road. The contractor was investigated for their historic experience, and the records came back in very positive. So Prius Engineering, who did the design work for us, feels that they're a very suitable and reputable company. The financial implications I've already talked about. So ultimately the recommendation is for staff to award both contracts to Triax in the amount of $442,287. Alternatives would be to proceed with that recommendation or to not proceed with that recommendation, or any other alternative that council would like to recommend.
Questions? David? Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Gary. I've got 2 questions. One, we already chatted about earlier. It's that we've had so many things go over budget. What lessons can we learn so that we don't have so many things go over budget in the future? But the second one is just around the culverts. Like, my understanding of what happened is there was just too much water coming through, and so it went over and it started taking part of the roadway, the ones on Mount Gardner. So are we going to replace them with bigger culverts, or how do we avoid that? Or was there some blockage in the culvert?
I think it was, I think there were some blockages for sure. Obviously, I'm coming in sort of after the fact, but my understanding is that there were some blockages. This was also a unique case where I understand there was mismanagement per se of the Grafton Lake outfall. So there was a higher than anticipated flow of water. I have chatted with Trius, and they indicated that they have done the calculations and to ensure that there's adequate capacity to the criteria or standard that's expected for those culverts. Yeah, there was consideration for relining the culverts. So that was one option, is to slip line, but that reduces the capacity, and it was felt like it's already been tested with a high flow. So it was requiring full replacement rather than a more affordable slip line option because of concerns of diminishing the capacity of them.
But the new culvert will have sufficient capacity that we shouldn't have that problem of water just flowing right, too much water flowing over the road and ripping the road apart?
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't. I think one of the things that ripping the road apart, I mean, it was certainly recognized that the culverts are highly degraded. So when the culverts are not in good shape, and depending on how they were constructed, part of the problem is just that what generally happens is why the road collapses isn't just because of lack of capacity, but because of the water actually penetrates on the outside of the culvert and burns the material.
Oh, I see.
So it's a term called piping, and so it's the actually the water being able to get past the culvert or through the culvert because of poor seams and perforations, that it just erodes the soil around in the whole mass. just attributed, it happened in any culvert. If it's well sealed and constructed on the outside, it's always important to make sure that there is a seal, so that if water can't get through the culvert itself, it can't penetrate around the culvert through the soil material. And then if there's going to be additional capacity, then it safely overtops the road. So the shoulders and sealing the top, the upstream end of the culvert is very important as well.
Good, okay, thanks a lot. Yeah.
And then Sue Ellen. Oh, you weren't in it, Sue Ellen?
Yeah, you mentioned, in your report, you talk about the extreme weather event, the rain. But now I'm hearing, beavers, blockages, and Grafton Lake. So I'm wondering, Grafton Lake would, that would impact the one culvert by the works yard,
Correct.
but not the other one, right?
Not Guild Creek, no.
Right, okay. And the beavers, are you anticipating, these were the ones under Mount Gardner Road?
These were specifically in the Miller Road.
Thank you, okay, that was just when I came in, and so I wasn't sure about
Yeah.
that. And the third thing is, it's one thing to be big enough for this rain event, but then 5-10 years from now, if we're in climate change conditions, will it be big enough for that?
I will go back and review and recheck the calculations from CREAS. It should have allowed for an allowance for climate change.
That would be great, because I just haven't seen a lot of evidence that climate implications are taken into account with our infrastructure replacement, so a checking would be
Yep.
welcome, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Anybody else? Just a couple of things. So it looks like we're about 30% over on these estimates. Now we're taking out of the, Raj, question for you, taking out of the 2018, 2019 budgets. How much of that was covered for this?
As Glen had mentioned, for these two culverts, we had a $350,000 budget provision.
Oh, okay, so that's,
And the project's coming in at about 90,000 over.
yeah.
But we don't require a financial plan amendment, because overall for culvert replacements, we do have a $600,000 provision in the budget. So what we'll be doing when we do the 2020 budget is we should have a better idea of what the Miller Road culvert replacement will cost, and we'll come forward for additional, with an updated funding request for repairs and maintenance on that culvert.
All right, well, that's great. Well, we gotta go ahead. Any further discussion?
I'll move the motion.
Okay,
If I can find it.
all right.
Starts on the
The
first page.
council approved the award of both Guild Creek culvert replacement and invitation to tender file number 19168 and Mount Gardner Road culvert replacement invitation to tender file number 18346 to Triex Contracting Limited for a total combined construction amount not to exceed $442,287.
Second to David. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. And back to Glen.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
It's all right.
Yeah.
thanks, Maureen.
Need that face there. Really unanimous. And back to you, Glen, for the next one.
So the second report is reporting on the Snug Cove sewer facility infrastructure project, which involves both a pump station upgrade as well as a valve chamber upgrade. This project was actually tendered before my presence here, serving the municipality. However, it's taken some time. One of my early tasks was to review the projects that were ongoing and put a new fresh set of eyes on it. And this project raised a few questions for me, and I have been working with CREAS for several weeks to investigate a couple items which have led to the cost increase from the original tender. The budgeted amount was $200,000 for this project. It closed, I believe the original base price was $189, with also a 10% contingency, so the original tender submission was $208,000. With some design updates, has added 30,000. The design updates are around 3 different items. One is electrical upgrades. When the tender closed, there was a lot of question during the design process about the adequacy of the electrical system. And it wasn't meeting code. There was a decision at the day that it was functioning okay, so the upgrades were not warranted. My personal and professional recommendation is I think there's a responsibility to meet code for a variety of reasons. So some of the design modifications, approximately, I think $14,000 of that is to bring the electrical system up to code. The other area of concern that I had is that is the temporary pumping requirements. So this system needs to be taken offline to allow the works to be done, and that's the final push before the water sewage treatment plant. It's right against Snug Cove. It's in a very public place. The temporary bypass pumping had limited capacity relative to the ultimate pump station, and the contract as written put all the onus on Glen municipality to maintain and operate that temporary system throughout construction. I think staff, current leadership within Public Works had some concerns with that responsibility. In this case, if the system were to fail, an emergency response would be to throw up your hands because there's no backup system. We looked at records, and it's around people's decisions around people's appetite for risks. If we maintain dry weather conditions, we don't get a lot of precipitation, everything should be fine with the original design. But in wet weather conditions with high use, I went back in the records, and in recent times, there certainly are instances where both pumps had to kick in. If during construction, which is expected to be at least 4 weeks, and it's in September, so there is a chance of wet weather, then there's a potential of a sewage backup or sewage spill. And I'm sure you all are.
That's a health risk, a public health risk.
It's a risk from all kinds of angles.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
Where is this pump station?
it's right down, right beside the marina, right in the lawn.
Along the boardwalk.
Yeah. So I went back and Chris then worked with the contractor to find a new solution. We've got a much more robust system now. We had conversations around shared responsibility for operation and maintenance. Chatting with Public Works, they're accepting of operation and being a response at night, but want the contractor to take full responsibility during working hours. Now having a robust bypass system in place, the risk is low and should not be a problem. So all in, dealing with all of those issues in combination is about $30,126, raising the total amount to $238,609. The financial situation is that this project was being funded out of the Special Works Reserve, and the additional funds, rather jump in here if I'm going to screw it up for you, but based on the total bid and recommended price, an additional increase of $50,550 be approved from the Snug Cove sewer facilities infrastructure be required. Funding this project from the Community Works Fund would bring the approved budget to $250,550. One option available to council is to approve the increase of $50,550 and proceed with the recommendation given. And instruct the CFO be instructed to include the increase in the 2019 Snug Cove sewer facility infrastructure from the Community Works Reserve in the fall financial plan amendment, and that council approved the award of the pump chamber and pump station upgrades to Western Star Contracting in the amount of $238,609. Alternatively, council would direct staff not to proceed at this time, or any other further recommendation you wish to offer.
All right, Sam.
Thank you for the report. As the former person on the Snug Cove sewer, advisory committee, I was down there and looked at it and understood that this was coming up. Even for a couple of years, they were talking about it, and that the groundwater leaks in through the 20-year-old concrete, because it's just a concrete. So is that concrete containment vault going to be replaced with something more durable, is one question.
Yeah, the design right now is not to replace it, it's to refurbish it. By the sounds of it, it's structurally sound, but it needs to be resealed. So the strategy at this point is resealing it. The valve chamber is something that right now everything's combined together, and it's a real operational and safety challenge for them. So a new structure will be installed.
Inside?
No, a new structure will be installed on the south side of the pump station, which will house all the valving mechanisms. And the pump station will remain with the pumps and as the wet well, and it'll be refurbished and sealed to prevent that intrusion.
Very good.
Not to suggest that there could be other intrusion from the system upstream, but certainly sealing that unit up.
Great, okay, thank you. And then my other question is for Raj, probably. I don't quite understand in the financial implications here. It says, with respect to alternative sources of funding, it would be inappropriate to use funds from any reserves that have been funded, through property taxation to fund sewer infrastructure. So why is it inappropriate to use on sewer infrastructure?
Because not the entire island uses the sewage system. The sewage system, all the operating costs and capital and maintenance costs should be funded through user rates. And the reserves should be built up through those user rates, and those are collected from users of the sewer system.
Gotcha.
If we were to
Is it
use
just
something
the way
like the capital renewal replacement or one of the other reserves that have been built up through collecting taxation revenue, then everybody on the island would be contributing towards the refurbishment or replacement of this. So the reserve that has been built up using user rates the balance is inadequate to pay for the entire project. So the only appropriate reserve I could think of was the gas tax reserve fund, which is based on grant funds that have been received by the municipality through provincial government grant for tax funding.
No, that's great, thank you. I was just reading the sentence
Okay.
wrong, because the end of the sentence says, funded through property taxation to fund sewer infrastructure. Anyway, I just read the sentence a different way, so thank you very much. I think that's very fair.
So just on that, Raj, so what we're doing on Cardina Road there with the replacement of the piping under the road there, is that the same pot of money this is coming out of, or?
No, the Cardina Road project is largely funded through grant funding, and
No, not the road, but
The water.
the water main or whatever the replacement.
That's propane water.
That's
Water.
propane water,
Water,
yeah.
so that was
Different.
Yeah, so they're completely separate.
Allison?
I'm just trying to figure out the difference. You've got 238 is the amount requested, and then you said we're at 50,000. You're getting the whole thing up to 250,000. So what's the difference? What's the 12?
I think it's the GST.
But we don't pay GST, we get it all back.
Were there other works that need to be done that aren't covered in the contract? That's what I assumed the other works were, because there was a slight difference between the tender and the budget amount. When I read the report as well, I assumed it was about $13,000. $12,000 to $13,000
Yeah.
difference. I assumed it was works that, other costs that were going to be incurred. But if we do approve the higher amount, Allison, we will still only take out of the reserve what is required.
Yeah.
Well,
But I didn't ask the question when I read the report, I had just assumed that we required an additional.
I'll have to ask,
Provision.
Rachel drafted it for me, I just assumed it was the GST, which I understand you get a rebate for.
Yeah,
that.
we would include, we should.
But the motion is granting, well, I guess it's the award is for the 238,609 plus GST.
Michael first.
And when I saw that, I just wanted to, can you tell me, do you keep a sort of contingency? What number are you using for, you've been through all these figures, I'm sure, 101 ways.
Yeah.
What sort of contingency are you putting on overall? Because, you know, this science is imperfect at best. So
Yeah.
what are you using, 10%, 15%?
In this case, it was 10%, which is standard for what we call it.
And when I saw it, I wondered whether that was just some contingency.
10% for construction is typical. It's what we would call a Class A cost estimate. And
Yeah.
10% when we're in a planning stage. We talked a little bit earlier about the fact that budget numbers generally budgets can get sometimes use a thumb to identify the value. Then you get into project planning, which is referred to as a Class B, and that's usually a 50% contingency, and then it gets refined thereafter. But I think in addition to contingencies, and I was explaining to Councillor Hawking that sometimes I think what happens is that people doing planning don't consider softer nuanced costs, for example, traffic control or the staging of construction. Like Miller Road needs to be done in 4 stages in order to accommodate traffic, and was that accounted for? Perhaps not. So there's a lot of complexities with these projects that perhaps are not getting accounted.
I'm speaking in sympathy. I'm speaking in sympathy there because when I see here your tender documents, now the tender documents may have a 10% contingency. I can see that, but the overall project, when all the tender documents and everything else comes together, whether you yourself have said, okay, we've got a 10% built in there, but for the things that these people aren't even going to consider, whether you've got an extra contingency, which is, if you like, your contingency, which we can approve up to. Because I personally am not averse to that, because if everybody thinks they're going to think of everything for every project.
And the internal contingency.
Yes,
Yeah, that's not uncommon, actually.
No, well, that's why I'm asking. I'm very much aware of that.
Yeah.
And I advocate, if you ever feel it's desirable, I would be someone to support that.
Yeah.
Let's get the sticker shock over, and then we can hope to be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, the city of Surrey in particular uses that a lot. They included contingency in the tender, but they also use their own internal contingency.
Yeah.
Allison? Oh no, sorry, it's Rob.
Yeah, I actually had the same question Michael had, why you're using 10 versus 15%, and I think you sort of answered that, and sort of if it's more at a planning stage, it's a bit higher, I take it, you're using.
Considerably higher.
The closer we get to it, the more down it goes, so because you get more certainty, so that's good. And just the other thing, Creos, my understanding was we were gonna move away from them. Is that still, are we using those guys still, or knowing some of the history of the other projects where?
I definitely think it's a conversation to be had. My general sense, and obviously you probably have to have further conversation with other staff leaders. I think Creos certainly at this moment has a lot of has their fingers in many projects, and I think for consistency to see these through, for sure we need to draw on that near term. My sense is that Creos has a place here, but I think they're being stretched, and I think we need to reconsider the involvement and setting direction and setting expectations. I think that's one thing that in my conversations with Creus is that I think their bar and the expectations is a little low, and I'm trying to elevate that.
Yeah, this is more of a conversation for a closed meeting.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, any other further discussion? Again,
Well, if you add 5% onto the 238, you're pretty damn close to 255, 50, which is rounded up.
oh, there you go.
Yeah, I think it was the GST.
All right, I'll read the recommendation. As far as council has approved $200,000 for the 2019 Snug Cove sewer facilities infrastructure, whereas submissions for Snug Cove pump station and valve chamber upgrade, invitation to tender reference number 15142 have been reviewed by staff and the project manager and exceed the available budget. Therefore, be it resolved, the council approve an increase of $50,550 to the approved budget for the Snug Cove sewer facilities infrastructure, to a total approved budget of $250,550, with the increase to be funded from the Community Works Reserve. And further be it resolved, the council approve the award of Snug Cove Pump Station and Valve Chamber Upgrade Invitation to Tender, reference number 15142 to Western Star Contracting Limited in the amount of $238,609 plus GST, and that the Chief Financial Officer be instructed to include the increase of Snug Cove sewer infrastructure budget funded from the Community Works Reserve in the fall 2019 financial plan amendment. Second that. Thank you, Michael.
I didn't hear that. Can you repeat that?
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Maureen,
Yes.
in favor?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. It is unanimous. Thank you. So we're going to move on to 2.3, and I'm not too sure what the discussion, I guess it's, Glenn, if you don't mind making notes just for,
Yeah, and maybe I could just start that off.
Sure.
I was the one that suggested adding it back into this
Yeah.
agenda. It's gonna be led by Glen and Raj, but if there's specific input from council members that they'd like to see as part of that agenda, I think Glen circulated the general draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would suggest just, if there's any ideas out there that you would like to add to this meeting, let both Glen and Raj know. Doesn't have to be at today's meeting.
This is the
Okay.
draft water
For
harmonization meeting.
the, this is
for the meeting.
for
August.
August 22nd.
Town hall meeting, or whatever you want to call it, yeah, on the water issues.
If we're talking, did you send the draft, right?
I think Glen did.
I sent it out earlier today.
You sent that there?
Yes.
Okay.
But what was the heading?
Oh, here we go. Oh,
Or revise,
So, I mean, we don't have to discuss it at today's meeting, but it's just,
No.
if you do have any extra ideas that might be of benefit, because it's of the three water system communities, I understand, it's the water, Never Bay and Bowen.
Yeah.
And both the technical side and the financial side, but.
When do you need our comments by?
I would ask.
End of next week.
Okay,
Okay, that's good.
thank you.
I can give a quick overview if people want. Or,
No,
or
it's
it's
okay.
okay.
This is good.
The only thing I think that's missing maybe is a report on how many wells are active, how many have been killed, and how many are held in reserve for each different system.
I haven't actually, sorry, I don't know whether I haven't received it, I haven't done anything.
It's an
Who's
email
around?
from Hope at 12:37
Yeah.
PM today.
And I guess my question would be, is there going to be an overview of the allowances and the distribution?
Well, that's why I asked a report on the wells,
Yeah,
you know, what their capacity is. and-
We're gonna talk about certainly bylaws and
Yes.
allowances within cost structures.
yes,
We will report out on what we're observing of usage relative to that. But then I guess getting to a conversation like some of the email strings we've had around the need to, that assumes the water is available. But really what needs to be done, in my personal opinion, is we need to redetermine a sustainable yield of those aquifers and then come up with a new
Distribute the water
base
accordingly.
allocation
Yeah.
based on availability and not based on the book value.
History, yeah.
And I apologize for not being at the last two meetings where this was discussed, but certainly pulling together that historical report
Yeah.
shows that we need to change our governance structure altogether. And I think what I'd like to see is in September, as part of our strategic planning session, is look at all of our water systems and how we can update our subdivision servicing bylaw, how we can, Daniel had an idea of maybe it's development permit, a water development permit area across the island to help control future development as well. So there's all sorts of things that I think if we can have a workshop focused on council and staff in September, how we
Yeah.
move forward generally on this, not just those three water systems, but the whole island.
Yeah.
My opinion is, having spoken to quite a lot of people, they did that would get general support. I think the feeling is that the more holistic approach to this whole situation would get is of wider appeal.
I just know our current system does not work.
That's
I
general.
mean, that was really evident in doing that historical review for whatever reasons, and I think there's a whole bunch of different reasons. We need to look at the whole
Correct.
governance structure differently.
Well, I think everybody has to be painted with the same brush. That's the other thing, is that there's inequities all through the system. There doesn't have to be.
And you see that in, you know, what for me really resonated was a report from Brad Hawthorne from 11 years ago, 12 years ago, which talked about a harmonized merged billing system and just how we approach our water systems generally, 12 years ago.
That's before climate change was an issue too.
Yeah, that's right. So it's even more important now that we can get onto
But
that.
it's a big topic that I think we need to really
Yeah.
focus at the senior staff council level.
Yeah.
Yeah, for clarification, the intentionally make an opening statement and a reminder later on that this session on the 22nd is really just to discuss the technical and operational issues, and we're not going to get dragged into the government's discussion on the 22nd. I think that's something that needs to happen
I think you want to do that.
in another venue.
Until we have something a little bit more
Well,
solid.
and that those governance decisions need to be made by council,
Yes.
Absolutely.
not by communities.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maureen, any further to add to that?
Well, I apologize. I haven't actually heard a lot of what was being said. The reception was a bit bad. But I just wanted to comment on the undercurrent article that appeared that quoted the proceedings of our last council meeting and Glen at length, especially where he talked about the importance of looking at improved rainwater collection, conservation measures. I mean, one of the things that struck me from that last meeting was, and I think I got this straight, and correct me if I'm wrong, the comment that the conservation measures that step 4 that we put in place did not have an impact on consumption. And I'll keep talking, but I'd like confirmation that that actually was the case. I'm hoping that at the meeting on the 22nd, we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the climate action related measures that we might take. And I'm hoping that the meeting on the 22nd won't conflict with the meeting of the Mayor's Standing Committee on Community Lands. We're trying to reschedule that, and one potential date was the 22nd, and I'd like to avoid that. Over and out.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Maureen. David, do you want to make a comment there?
Yeah, well, now I heard you say also about switching from stage 4. It actually, I think it's the opposite of what Maureen was saying. Maureen, I think what Maureen was saying, she understood you to say that when we implemented stage 4, it actually didn't change consumption. But my understanding is it did change consumption, but when we went back from stage 4 to whatever, stage 1, that people kind of stayed at a low level of consumption. So which of us was correct? So are you saying that, is it true that when we went to stage 4, that consumption didn't change?
It was with relatively limited data. I can definitely look at it more precisely, but the general overview of the numbers to me didn't show significant change in habits of consumption. It certainly didn't change the operation and the functioning of the system, only because at that time the leak was quite a significant contributor to the operational issues. But
I'm surprised about that. I mean, everyone I know was siphoning their bathwater and
Yeah, but
using
David,
all their great
what
water.
did the consumption get measured from? Was it just what was running out of the reservoir, or was it reading
the
individual
residential
meters
meters,
and comparing them a week later?
residential meters.
Right, so reading residential meters on day 1 and then comparing the reading again 10 days later or something?
Yeah.
And we looked at admittedly the average. We didn't look at individual consumers. There's no doubt that I think there's some that probably did change their habits significantly, and if we were to look at it on a lot-by-lot basis, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some significant drops. But when we looked at it on the community-wide average, and then we looked at the community-wide average, there wasn't a substantial change.
Okay, I'll just add a little bit here, because I know of one situation in our neighborhood where someone, has some sort of a water system and they just use
You're king every bit? Thank you.
thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons in a day. Whereas everyone I know was measuring daily, and we're in the like 50 to 70 gallons a day. kind of thing.
Wow, that's impressive.
That's what we were doing, that's what the neighbors were doing.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of astonished, but I guess if there's some giant users and you're looking at average.
Well,
That's
we are seeing
issue.
that, is that the extremes
Yeah.
are quite extreme. Like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
some that are very thrifty with their water, there's no question. And then we have some that are in the thousands
Yeah.
of gallons a day. So there's a huge spread. And some at the higher end, I don't think change much.
No.
A few at the lower are probably those who were already low, so they squeezed a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
They can't
So I was-
speak.
It's
yeah.
certainly my experience living part-time in Bluewater is a lot like David.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I know so many people who were
Yeah.
doing that extra
Yeah.
conserving
Right,
measure, so.
and so they were already at the low end of the spectrum, and they weren't adequate to compensate for those who just have.
Yeah, even though they were saving 20%.
So we need a system in place that recognizes people that are working hard to conserve and those that aren't.
Can I
Absolutely. So,
just chime in? Something that might be helpful too is when I believe it was Maureen and I were talking with Kirsten Watson about this harmonized approach that we might develop. And this was around fines, and when there were overages, and some people get caught off guard because they've installed big underground irrigation systems, or they have a hose bib that's underneath the deck, and they bought the house and they didn't know that it was down there or whatever. And so sometimes there's a big leak, and the people in the house don't even know. So, and that caught some homeowners by surprise, and they're going, what, this big fine? So I think there's just general more awareness and more ways for people to check their own consumption and all that kind of thing, if there are these things. It's just, we all need more tools and more awareness, and I think sometimes those irrigation things that are supposed to save,
yeah.
they can, especially as they age, there's problems that come with any plumbing system, so, yeah, anyway.
It's just,
In case it helps, there might be other things like that.
it's just awareness, it's all about awareness, bringing up people's awareness about the water.
There is,
And how special it is.
there is a little
Yeah.
electronic device you can get that will tell you if you're using more water than a certain amount.
So I have one more, and this is where I find myself in a difficult position, because obviously a lot of people in King Edward Bay speak to me, and so on the agenda, when I look at, our objectives to ensure water systems are effectively operated and so on, absolutely, and sustainable quality, so supplying quality of water. But one of the issues that they raise is the issue of fairness, and worry that their system will continue to be degraded without changes in the blue water system. So that will come up. But the media, yeah.
I mean, the original council resolution that was adopted June 8th, I think it was, whatever that first meeting in June. Yeah, when we hired Urban Systems is also including a more long-range management strategy. So we of course won't have that done for the August 22nd meeting, but the intent, I think that's part of the messaging is that we are looking at.
Yeah,
The work is underway. It is underway.
Yeah, and that's why we have a section in the meeting on where to from here, and that's really talking about the next steps that need to revisit operational, optimize the performance of the current systems. We need to reinvestigate, the appropriate wells and withdrawals from now. We need to reinvestigate appropriate operation of reservoirs, as well as further work to really understand the yield, the sustainable yield of those aquifers. So there's many steps, and I will outline.
And whether it's
that
3 systems,
that
1 system.
game plan.
I mean, that's all of the long-term conversation, I think.
Yeah, I think it's very important to somehow, and I don't know how to do it, is to get a handle on the outliers. The people that are using 20,000 gallons a night or something like that.
Well, the metered rate structure
Yeah.
will pick that up.
Yeah, but
And
some
we-
people don't care about it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't
No,
matter.
I know that.
$50.
But I don't
$50
know.
could be,
$50 for
that
somebody
could be,
who's got several
Well,
million.
we send out bills for $5,000 and $10,000 for fines.
It could be much more punitive.
Yeah.
but-
And I think also, as I said earlier, more meter reading.
but it
often.
doesn't stop, it doesn't stop for us, does it?
Well,
But you
there's,
make it punitive.
when they sent some of the big bills out, it turned out there were issues that they had no idea had happened, and as soon, and that's why we
That's what I was
developed
talking
the overuse waiver policy.
Yeah.
And then the other issue is the people who just know there's a leak and don't do anything about it, and in that kid's situation, their water has been turned off. And in that situation also, their fines have not been reduced. So,
Yeah, it's interesting.
I'd like to, if I may, just ask a question about this leakage under houses. I noticed I think it's next door to the river running under ours, it would seem. It always has been water, seems. I was at a friend's recently and they have these gas tanks, and when the gas tanks run low, the little Wi-Fi device on the top contacts the gas supplier and says, hey, you better get round to that house to top up the gas because the gas is running low, which is a pretty sensible arrangement, right? Rather than running out of gas. Is there any science where, as a homeowner, there's a device I
I
can
have
somehow
one in my
append, maybe we should circulate it, that's like
We can tag it
we
in
can
some.
look at our consumption on a more regular basis and going under a yard of gravel in the driveway, trying to manhandle this somewhat this thing, which is actually I think got a rock on it on its moving, but I mean just a general, is there a science that we could make public or maybe start looking into? It says, hey, if you do this, you can on your little app work out your daily consumption, because I think it's valid. Someone was talking about that leaky faucet underneath the house.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a lot of older houses here, and probably a lot of older, and people who have no intention of degrading the water system. So anything like that would be helpful. If you could make any suggestions, or Alison, if you've got anything that
I think we need to have a
Yeah.
three-pronged approach. It's going to be looking at the governance structure, it's going to be looking at the operational structure, and then it'll be looking at public education as well, because it's more than just our 7 water systems. It's.
All the well users.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So getting that sort of information out to the public as part of our strategy when we move ahead with this in the fall.
It's gonna be a big issue.
I'm just going to suggest that we might want to, and I don't know how practical it will be in the short term, but think about a fourth aspect, which is restoring the aquifer. I don't know what conditions are upstream, or whether we find out that one winter's worth of rain might restore it. That would be the ideal. But if it's going to take longer, then I think, well, or even if it isn't going to take longer, I mean, up above King of, up in the Crown Lands up there on Mount Collins is one of the places that industrial logging has been proposed. And that can't be good for a watershed in terms of helping it recharge.
Or just
level-
keep the water.
But anyway, I'm just gonna speak in favor of a restorative approach to water, not just sustainable use, which is what we've been talking about, but actually maintaining and restoring the capacity of that aquifer to provide good quality water no matter what happens in the future.
Part of asset management, isn't it, really?
Yeah, but it also relates to our interest in the impacts of the proposed logging.
Yeah.
And so I want to keep that in the conversation so that we can use whatever evidence that comes up to help us with our ongoing advocacy around maintaining and restoring our watershed. Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. Any further comments? I mean, it's gonna be huge, this whole water thing, and it's gonna take a long time to work our way through it. But it's so super important, it's one of the most important things we have on the island.
We have I think it's exciting, we have an opportunity to be cutting edge and lead other islands by example, other communities, and
Yeah,
Especially
have
now,
to approach it
everybody's,
all different.
and people's attention is focused on it, they can see what can happen. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm excited.
all right, and, sorry.
So, no, I just said I'm excited too.
Yeah, good.
Change.
Any further discussion for this meeting, or should we?
Move meeting adjourned.
Move to adjourn, good, second, thank you. All in favor?